Onto this headline story now. MPs will converge on the City Hall in Cape Town this week for a parliamentary debate on the contentious Phala Phala report. The MPs will vote on whether to adopt the findings of the Section 89 independent panel that's found that President Cyril Ramaphosa may have violated the Constitution and breached his oath of office. Now, this relates to how Ramaphosa dealt with the theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars from his Phala Phala farm back in 2020. Erin Bates is part of our team in Cape Town as we watch the build-up to that debate. And Erin, I suppose it's all still speculation up in the air on how many ANC MPs, more specifically, are likely to vote in support of this report. But no matter how you dice it, it feels like we're on uncharted territory here.
Quite right, Ayanda. No matter how you slice it or you dice it, this is a never-before occurring process in the National Assembly, in Parliament. And the reason we're going to be at the City Hall on Tuesday rather than in the parliamentary precinct is, of course, because some parts of Parliament were burnt to a crisp at the beginning of this year. But, of course, all eyes will be on that gathering in person only. Opposition MPs insistent that it should be an in-person gathering of the National Assembly on Tuesday to debate the Section 89 panel report and the way forward or not. And as you've pointed out, there certainly will be a lot of interest in how the ANC MPs and the ANC caucus handles this question. I'm joined now by Associate Professor Kathy Powell from the University of Cape Town. She specializes in public law and she's very graciously agreed to join us on a Sunday afternoon. Kathy, if we just look at this, why is it that with the President approaching the Constitutional Court in law, Parliament can still move ahead?
There are two reasons. One is that the doctrine of sub judice, which would be the thing that would hold them back, doesn't in fact prevent all discussion of a case that's before the courts. It only prevents discussion of a case if that discussion would be detrimental to the administration of justice in that case. So that's the first reason. But the other is that Parliament is a coordinate branch of government to the courts. In fact, it's the only branch of government with a democratic mandate. So we've seen this before when the public protector tried to stop Parliament from functioning, from doing their work, because she had yet another rescission application to bring to the Constitutional Court. We've seen, although Parliament had initially put things on hold, Parliament finally decided, no, we've just got to go ahead and do our job, and the court supported that position. In fact, the Western Cape High Court, when it handled yet another request for an interdict by the public protector, said, what we're dealing with here is the capacity of the legislature of the country to do its job of oversight. So that job has got to carry on until it actually gets stopped by a court hearing.
Now, Ayanda, in the introduction, mentioned the ANC caucus and some interest in how it may or may not approach this debate on Tuesday. So there's the debate and then this question of how do we move forward. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit and some of your thoughts?
Well, I'm conscious that we're having the parliamentary debate before we actually have an ANC position on this issue. Because the ANC has been footballing this thing between different bodies of the ANC. We don't have a position, which in theory should mean that every member of the ANC can turn up on Tuesday, speak his or her mind and take his or her own position. Now, of course, you also have what's called a three-line whip. You could very well have all the ANC MPs being instructed, you're going to vote against this or for this. I imagine against it. But in theory, the issue has not yet been decided by the ANC as a body. So I'd be fascinated to see what particular issues individual MPs decide to bring up when they look at this on Tuesday in the debate.
So that's interesting because as much as the ANC votes on bloc, so do opposition parties, and yet MPs make an oath to serve the Constitution and the people of the country when they come and serve in Parliament. So what should be on the minds of MPs, in your view, based on the law around the duties of MPs when they walk into Tuesday's discussion?
Well, that's a very good point, and it's been aired by the Constitutional Court, that it doesn't matter, I mean, it matters to their jobs maybe, but it doesn't matter to their legal obligations or to their constitutional obligations that MPs hold their jobs in Parliament thanks to being on a party list of their parties. Their obligation, and this is the Constitutional Court itself, speaking in the UDM case, is their obligation is to the electorate. So when they speak on Tuesday, when they ask questions, when they make points. What they've got to be canvassing is whether the requirements for stage 2 of the impeachment process of the president have in fact been met. So they need to ask whether there's sufficient evidence that the president has committed a serious breach of the Constitution or the law. And they should, in fact, as they prepare for that, be looking into what a serious breach is and what the Constitution requires and where exactly the problems are supposed to be in the report with the President's conduct.
So, Kathy, you mentioned sub judice. It's a Latin phrase. There's another one, prima facie or prima facie. Yes. Lord knows how to pronounce it properly. You might. But that's come up as an issue, and this question around sufficient evidence or on the face of it evidence. Can you just discuss that, especially since you've had a look at the President's submissions to the Constitutional Court and some of his issues with the submissions, the evidence or hearsay, some might say, of Arthur Fraser?
I must just say up front, I've only had second-hand reports of the President's submission. I haven't been able to find the actual original document. But I know that the issues that you've named have been raised in his account, in his challenge. I'll show off my Latin first. It's prima facie, and it means at first glance. And under the rules of the National Assembly, that's actually what the complainants against the President had to provide. They had to provide prima facie evidence. So evidence that on its own suggests that something's wrong. Under the NA rules, what the panel was supposed to decide was whether there's sufficient evidence for stage 2 to be gone ahead with. Now, the panel actually decided that its job was to find prima facie evidence, which I think is a bit tricky, because what it ended up doing was building a great deal on the gaps in the President's response to the very, very sketchy allegations made against him. And I agree with Thuli Madonsela on this one, that the two words have to mean something different because the rules bothered to use two different terms. And what I would suggest is that prima facie evidence, that what the ATM was meant to put forward was something that in itself suggests there's a problem. And then the panel was supposed to decide firstly whether that evidence was in fact plausible. That evidence that was brought, not the response by the President, but the evidence that was brought, whether that was plausible. And secondly, whether it amounted to a serious violation of the Constitution or the law. And I'm afraid what the panel seems to have done is to build so many inferences on the absence, the gap in the President's response, that it infers the seriousness of the President's conduct by what the gaps could mean. And I don't think that is finding sufficient evidence in the case brought by the ATM.
Associate Professor Kathy Powell from UCT, thanks very much. Ayanda, there you have it, some sort of commentary on what we've heard so far and what has already developed ahead of this debate on Tuesday. It's going to be a real pressure test for this National Assembly closing up its calendar year for 2022. One wonders how much decorum there may be in the debate, how much sort of rigor in terms of the actual substance of the report as opposed to mudslinging and heckling. We can always live in hope, and it's here, right here at the City Hall in Cape Town, where that will be taking place on Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, absolutely. Hard to imagine, Erin, that Parliament was meant to rise on the 1st of December, now the 11th. And it's amazing how much has taken place in the past 2 weeks. Erin Bates, live to us there from Cape Town. For now, Erin, thanks very much indeed.